The Broncos wrap up Friday practice at the UC Health Training Center as training camp is ongoing for this football team. They're going to have a practice on Saturday and Sunday before heading to Minnesota next week. George Stoia of the Gazette joins me to talk about what he's seen up close and personal from Broncos Camp. Plus, we analyze some of the storylines that are currently impacting this team. We react on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of the show. Locked On Broncos is your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos analyst for the Locked On NFL Network and 9 News. You can follow me on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL. You can follow the show at Locked On Broncos. Very excited to be joined alongside by George Stoia of the Gazette. Here a little bit later on in the show, he's going to talk about the Broncos quarterback competition. He was at practice this morning at the UCL Training Center. He was able to see what's going on, and we're going to have a little conversation about practice versus preseason. Now that we've seen that the NFL has had one preseason game with the Cowboys and the Steelers, maybe it'll get people to tone down a little bit. Practice is where you're going to see a lot of these mistakes happen. I know I've been harping on it here on this podcast, but it is a message that everybody is freaking out about over social media. We won't necessarily see that necessary separation from a quarterback or maybe any of these other position competitions until you play another team. So starting things off, let's get into our Broncos news and notes to open up today's episode of the show. Friday's practice at the UCL Training Center, a couple of standouts, McTelvin Agim and Draymond Jones. Two guys continue to stand out. Now, I want to focus a little bit more on McTelvin Agim right here because he's been one of those names that has stepped up since Mike Purcell's went down with an ankle injury, and he's been getting reps both at the defensive end position and also at the nose tackle position. So he's been working a little bit on the inside of the defensive lineman, inside where the guard and the center are, and also in between the guard and the tackle at times. So you like to be able to see a guy who can line up anywhere. And I think in today's NFL, it's very important that you have versatile defensive linemen that are comfortable playing a 1-tech and are also comfortable playing a 5-tech. McTelvin Agim is going to have to do that. Now, guys like Shelby Harris, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to listen to his podcast, Shell Shocked, but he was talking about one year he was playing in a 6-tech against a tight end, and that was against the Minnesota Vikings, and he threw Kyle Rudolph off of him. But you want to see guys move around a little bit. And I think that for where the Broncos are at as a defensive line unit, they have the perfect amount of guys who are strong, anchor point type of defensive linemen, and they have guys who have the combination of both size and speed and athleticism. I look at guys like Draymond Jones and Shelby Harris. I see a combination of size and athleticism from that position. I look at McTelvin Agim. He's been demonstrating in training camp so far that he's a little bit of both as well. So if you can fixate a defensive line rotation to have these guys come in, specifically when Draymond's off the field, you're confident if he's performing as well as he is so far right now in training camp, in the preseason and the regular season, you're confident with McTelvin Agim going in there and causing havoc. Now, he had a pass deflected at the line of scrimmage earlier today against Drew Lock, and it was intercepted, and it was obviously picked off by Josh Watson. So more opportunities for the defense, right? Being able to get your hand up and knock passes down at the line of scrimmage is huge. Tipping those passes up into the air, creating those opportunities for the defense to get takeaways off of a deflection is so critical because often at times it's very hard, very, very difficult for a cornerback or a safety to cover for a long period of time and then go make a play and intercept it. Often at times you have to be able to jump certain passing windows, or if you have a deflection that leads up to a bounce up in the air, it bodes well for your opportunities to do that. The Broncos need more takeaways here in 2021. That is a key to do it. So really excited to hear a lot about McTelvin Agim. Now, Draymond Jones had a couple of what would be sacks in a game in the Broncos team periods here on Friday at the UCL Training Center in practice, going against both Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. And so for Draymond, Vic Fangio mentioned in his post-practice press conference that he really expects Draymond to take a big jump from year 2 to year 3. We've seen a lot of jumps from him so far from his rookie season to last year, and now he's in a prime position to be the starter at the other defensive end position opposite of Shelby Harris here in a 2021 NFL season. That is something that we absolutely love to hear. We love to see it from Draymond, and can't wait to see him continue to dominate here this upcoming season. So all eyes on McTelvin Agim and Draymond Jones here at Broncos Camp on Friday. concluding practice. Keeping an eye on them on Saturday's practice and Sunday as well, leading us into next week when they're going to hold joint training camp practices against the Minnesota Vikings on Wednesday and Thursday, preseason action on Saturday. It is almost here, folks. Bear with us. We're so excited about it. I know you are as well, Broncos country. But our next point, too, talking about another player that's getting opportunities, Netani Muti. Vic Fangio had some praise for him, and he says that he has flashed, and he's one of those guys that stood out to him so far in training camp practice. He's one of those guys that could play left guard. He could play right guard. He could play center if he really wanted him to. He could play tackle, too. He has some experience there at the tackle position back at Fresno State, but he's more of that guard option for the Broncos, and they really like him on pulling plays. Specifically, you can line him up at right guard. You can pull him to the right side, play side. You can pull him from the right side to the left side, and you can pull him if he's on the left guard to the right side and also to play side. He's a good guy at extending and kicking out. Based on the small sample size that we have of him on film right now, he's really good at taking the appropriate angle and being able to kick guys out. And we saw him maul a couple of Carolina Panthers last season. So can we see a little bit more of Netani Muti this year? You never know. One guy can go down and all of a sudden you're up. And I think that Netani Muti is in a prime position right now, according to the Broncos coaching staff, that if something were to happen, they have the expectation that he can make that next jump. There's still areas of his game that he has to improve on, according to Coach Fangio, but he's working at it, and he's a prospect that has developed nicely so far under Mike Munchak's coaching scheme and the Broncos offensive line system that they do have. So keeping an eye on that. Jamar Johnson, Baron Browning, two young rookie players that were drafted by the organization earlier on this year. They're a little bit behind the curve, according to Vic Fangio. Jamar Johnson obviously was placed on the COVID-19 reserve list after either coming down with it or being a close contact. He just returned to practice, and he has to pick up on things a little bit. And one thing that Coach Fangio mentioned, he has to be a consistent tackler if he wants to see playing time on the field, whether that be on the defensive side, whether that be on special teams. He has to clean up that area of his game that he struggled with at college in Indiana. So keeping an eye on that. But Baron Browning, we know, dealing with a lower leg injury, was placed on the physically unable to perform list prior to training camp starting. And Coach Fangio said, to be frank, these guys are behind because you have to be out here. You have to be getting the reps in order to pick it up. So maybe I think we all have to temper our expectations this season for Baron Browning. But look, guys like Curtis Robinson, guys like Justin Sternad and Josh Watson, these three inside backers, they've been really impressing Broncos coaches. Not sure how much we're going to see Baron Browning at inside backer. If you look at the Broncos practice roster right now, it's listing Browning as an outside backer, but you have guys like Jonathan Cooper working there at outside backer as well. So what are the Broncos' plans? Well, luckily right now they have a lot of time, and Baron Browning has a lot of time, and he may have to sit and learn if he's not physically able to perform. The Broncos will continue to evaluate that, but you have to pick up the mental aspect of the playbook. And once you get back on the field, whenever that may be, you have to carry that over into the physical sense. So we're keeping our eyes on that situation this season for the Broncos and their rookie draft pick out of Ohio State. And lastly, one thing I wanted to touch on real quick is Adam Prentice, the fullback, undrafted rookie free agent, has been turning heads at Broncos camp. We were seeing a little bit of the fullback position evolve a little bit, not necessarily as the traditional hand in the dirt guy, but also as an H-back, being able to flex underneath formations, use it as a receiver. But Prentice has been having an impressive preseason from what I have gathered. They're springing guys open. He created a touchdown opportunity for Mike Boone in the red zone, clearing out Jamar Johnson. And then a couple of days ago, he had a really great play that freed Royce Freeman up for a big-time touchdown run. Can't wait to talk about that with George Stoia coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country. But before we get into our interview and our sit-down with George Stoia of the Gazette, I have to tell you about today's sponsor of the show. That's our good friends over there at Built Bar. Built Bar, the best-tasting protein bar on the market. It's a protein bar that tastes legitimately like a candy bar because the bars, they're covered in 100% chocolate. They're soft. They're easy to chew, and they have a flavor for everybody. 9 delicious flavors. My personal favorite, salted caramel, double chocolate, and they have the occasional limited time flavor, some special flavors that drop, and you can be notified of that by going to Built.com. Not only are Built Bars the best tasting protein bar on the market, they're also the healthiest. They contain 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar, folks. That is tremendous value for a protein bar that you can take anywhere with you on the go, and it's convenient, and it gives you a nice little energy boost, helps me get through some of my afternoon workouts, or if I haven't had breakfast, it gets me going and gives me that extra boost that I need to get across the finish line. And I want you to try a Built Bar today by going to Built.com. And when you go to checkout, use promo code LOCKED15. That's going to get you 15% off your next order. Once again, promo code LOCKED15 is going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com, the official protein bar of the Locked On Podcast Network. Fortunate right now to be joined by George Stoia of the Gazette to break down Friday's Broncos practice at the UCL Training Center. George puts in a lot of great time and effort, and his articles and column you can check out at the Gazette. George, Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to jump on here to talk about Broncos football from Friday. According to the reports, not a lot of people happy with how the quarterbacks had played today. We'll dive into the quarterback competition a little bit later on, but I want to start things off with some wild cards here. And Trinity Benson has been named so far in Broncos camp that has been making plays. And when we're talking about plays, he's making plays downfield at larger depths between 15 to 30 yards plus. And according to multiple reports today, he had another big day.
Yeah, and I just want to say for the record, because if any of the media members listen to this, they're going to be like, wow, he really did ask about Trinity Benson, because I've been the biggest Trinity Benson fan at practice so far. Is every time he catches the ball, I let everybody know it, because, the first day of camp, I think it was, he caught 2 touchdown passes, 2 deep, like 40, 50-yard touchdown passes. And I said, man, well, I wonder if Trinity Benson will make the team, and everybody kind of laughed at me. And since then, all he's done is catch all these passes. And so I'm like, hey, Trinity Benson. I'm actually working on a feature story about him, but he's been, I would say, the biggest surprise of camp so far. Obviously there's been a lot of players that have made, big leaps, maybe from year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3. And guys that obviously, again, have shown a lot of growth. But Trinity Benson is not a name that I think a lot of people had circled coming into this camp as somebody that would make this roster. And you look at that receiving room, and there's 4 guys that we can all sit here and name that are going to make the team, right? Judy, Sutton, Patrick, and Hamler, they're going to make the team. And then it's those last 2 to 3 spots are kind of up for grabs. And I think a lot of people circled Deontay Spencer as a guy to make the team, Tyree Cleveland, Seth Williams, the rookie they drafted in the 6th round. And Trinity Benson is honestly been better than all 3 of those guys. Seth Williams is starting to come on. He didn't catch a pass after the first few days, but he's starting to make some plays. Tyree Cleveland's been out with an injury since I think the 3rd day of camp. And Deontay Spencer really hasn't done a whole lot in the offense. Obviously he's their go-to return guy, but I think Hamler's really pushing him for that spot. So Benson's really got a great opportunity here, and he's taken advantage of it. I mean, he caught, I think, 4 passes today, and all of them were over 15 yards down the field.
Love it.
And a lot of them he was wide open. I mean, he made a great move and got open. And, I asked Vic about him today, and he said, the thing with Trinity is, he's been on the practice squad the last 2 seasons and has honestly shown a lot of growth. And, coming into this 3rd year, it feels like he's really starting to figure out the offense, understand his role, and really know what he's doing. And just talked about also, he's just a speedster. He's a guy that can just flat out run. I think he was a track star in high school, put up a lot of production in college and at the Division II level. So he's definitely a guy that is on my radar. I mean, again, I'm writing a feature story on him this weekend because he's been playing so well.
Well, and you mentioned Tyree Cleveland a little bit earlier, too. Outside the injury right now, that's something to keep an eye on. But, the first couple of days of camp, the reports were saying that he was struggling with some drops a little bit. So when you look at a guy like Trinity Benson, who's making these plays downfield, and even Kendall Hinton's been getting some flash as well. I mean, That is a very loaded wide receiver room. Now, depending on how many wideouts the Broncos tend to carry into the regular season, it's really hard to imagine at this point, because you want to factor in guys that can maybe spell a little bit of a load on special teams. Outside of that, I don't think we're going to see Cortland. I don't think we're going to see too much Tim Patrick. We might see a little bit of Tim Patrick on special teams, but those 4 guys mainly that we named, outside if Deontay Spencer gets beat out by KJ Hamler, I don't see any of those guys playing special teams. So I think it does open opportunities for a guy like Kendall Hinton, Trinity Benson, and even Seth Williams at this point. Do you imagine that these 3 players might be in line to make the roster?
Yeah, and you mentioned the special teams. Benson and Hinton have both been, returning mostly kickoff returns, not so much punt. It's been mostly Hamler and Spencer on punt, but a lot of them have been gunners on punt. I've seen that quite a bit. I think Trinity actually went with the first team today, first team punt, as a gunner. And so I definitely think there's a chance. I think Seth Williams. He's a guy that's flashed, and, he had a lot of production in college at Auburn. And I think if he can just get on a roll, again, it's tough for rookies, coming in. I think it's going to take him a week or so to really get ingrained in that offense and figure out kind of where he's at, understand the playbook, things like that. And I think we're starting to see that because he's starting to catch more balls down the field. But, I think that those 3 guys, I mean, Hinton's really on the fence. I'd like to see a little bit more of him when it comes to the team period. He's caught some good balls, down the field a few times. But I think his route running could be cleaned up a little bit. But yeah, all 3 of those guys are definitely in the hunt. I think that, again, other than those 4 guys that I mentioned, there's a lot of unknown there in the wide receiver room in terms of who's going to get those last, 2 or 3 spots, depending on how many guys they take.
Oh, what a good problem to have, too, by the way. I mean, having that much depth, it gives you options. I know Coach Azzani's probably thrilled to have those guys in that room there. Let's go to the offensive side a little bit in terms of the quarterback competition. I know every day it's kind of a scorecard as to who does better, who does worse. I'm on the fence of saying, hey, I think we really have to see how each quarterback does in joint training camp practices against the Vikings this week, and also just in the preseason, because it's really hard, just in my experience, going back and going against your own teammates every single day. There are certain formations and lineups that maybe the defense might pick up. But then again, too, the Broncos defense is super talented right now. So, I mean, I would be kind of shocked if this defense wasn't giving each of those quarterbacks a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think Broncos fans need to keep in mind when, some of us media will put out there like Drew Lock threw an interception or Teddy Bridgewater threw an interception. Be mindful that this is, I think, maybe a top 5, top 3 defense in the league. And when you're talking about the secondary, it might be the best secondary in the league. I mean, Justin Simmons has looked incredible, had the interception today against Teddy Bridgewater. And so I think that's definitely something you need to keep in mind. But I think your previous point about Minnesota, I really think that's where we're going to see one guy emerge. And I don't know who that is, because right now it's pretty deadlock. I think that both guys have, had their ups and downs. Teddy had the 3 interception day, but other than that, he's been probably the more consistent quarterback in terms of what you're going to get from him. Drew's obviously had some, pretty big flashy plays, obviously has, more arm talent, just to be flat out on it. It's pretty even. I don't know how else to describe it other than, both these guys are making some plays here and there. Both are making mistakes. Drew today was very, I would say conservative might be the right word. He had the interception, but again, that was a great play by Sosa, who jumped up and tipped that pass. And other than that, he didn't really have anything that happened. He had a couple touchdowns and 7-on-7 in the red zone, but he was also kind of indecisive at times and what would have probably been sacks on plays or just throwaways. And so, again, it's like we can sit here and break down every single day, but until they go up against a different team, I think we're really not going to know. And I think also, too, it should be noted that, who are they going up against? One, are they going up against the first team defense? Because we've seen them both just play great against the second team defense. And who are they throwing the ball to? And that's really important, because sometimes Locke will be going with the first team offensive line, but maybe it's like the 9th or 10th string wide receiver that he's throwing to against, Kyle Fuller. And it's like, well, they're probably not going to get open against Kyle Fuller. So I think that's something that, fans should keep in mind too, that the rotations and it's scripted. People need to understand the entire practice is scripted. And so I'm not saying that the defense knows what's coming, but they have sort of an idea of what's going to happen.
I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing those joint training camp practices. Obviously, Wednesday, Thursday next week in Minnesota, leading up to Saturday's preseason action. George, I know we're going to be very busy this season, specifically when games happen. But outside of that, too, let's shift it over to some of the young guys on the defensive side of the ball. Kaden Stearns has been one of those players that Vic Fangio had a lot of high praise for, said he's really picking up the defense quicker than probably he anticipated. We know Patrick Surtain is miles ahead on the defense in comparison to everybody else that is a rookie right now. What is it like being able to see Kaden Stearns being able to work a little bit with that safety group? Because K-Jack had a vet day not too long ago this week, and so we're able to see him mix in with the ones a little bit. What does the safety rotation look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's one of the more intriguing positions on the team right now in terms of, we know who's going to start there, right? Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, both, two of the better safeties in the league. But when you look at the depth there, it's Kaden Stearns, who has been fantastic so far as a rookie, Trey Marshall and PJ Locke. And then Jamar Johnson, you could throw in there too, who had his first day of practice today after being on the COVID list. But, PJ and Trey have obviously been around. They know the defense. They're sort of veterans. I know they haven't been in the league that long, but they know what's coming. But what's interesting about Kaden is, I don't know if he's as far along as those two guys, obviously being in the system, but it seems like every single time the ball is thrown anywhere in his direction, he's either breaking it up or he's picking it off. And when you're a rookie and you're trying to make the team, which I certainly think he's going to make the team. And honestly, I know it's only 8 days into practice. I think he's the future at that position, maybe after Kareem Jackson moves on. But, when you're a rookie, and you're trying to make plays, that's what you have to do, right? You have to go out there
Yeah.
and you have to do those sort of things. And he's done that so far. And I think that, what Vic said today about learning the playbook is a great sign, because that would be the one thing that I would say, okay, well, is he understanding the playbook, or is he just making great plays? What is it? And Vic also talked a little bit about he needs to see that he can tackle, and we'll find that out next week when they go full speed against Minnesota and actually play a game. But man, he's on the right track, and he's another guy like Trinity. I'm writing a feature story on, hopefully sometime before Minnesota. And it sounds like, talking to people that know him and grew up with him, he's always been this way. He's always been a ball hawk. He's been a guy that is incredibly intelligent. He was one of the smartest players on Texas's roster. I believe he was a captain there. He was a captain in high school. We got to talk to him a couple of days ago, and he's just a really good person to talk to. So I think he's showing all the right things so far.
Yeah, you love that too. And it kind of reminds me of the Broncos safety room a little bit after Super Bowl 50. You had Darian Stewart, TJ Ward, and then the Broncos, they get Justin Simmons, they get Will Parks. And I think that the Broncos right here, because for me, I think last year, I think everybody's concern was, hey, what happens if Justin Simmons or Kareem Jackson goes down or they have to miss the game for any reason? Who do you have behind them? I didn't feel like last year we were pretty confident in saying, okay, hey, this guy can step in and maybe do it. But now I think that the Broncos don't necessarily have that fear. And I think that Justin's going to be able to play a little bit more free this year and not have to worry too much, because you do have added help at the cornerback position. And we were talking about a little bit earlier. Last year, I feel like Justin Simmons had to really kind of make up for where the Broncos lacked in some of the cornerback deficiencies due to some of the matchups. I mean, we talked about the Atlanta Falcons game last year. Right before kickoff, Bryce Callahan is out. No AJ Bouye yet. And then now Justin Simmons has to play over the top a little bit more because you have Devontae Harris out there getting that start. So I'm excited to see what Justin can do. And obviously he's making some plays here at Broncos camp. But to kind of wrap things up here, let's talk about a guy that is coming off of ACL surgery. And this is a journey I've been following all offseason. And I think we're all bummed in week 2 last year when he went down. But Courtland Sutton has been looking good in Broncos camp. And we saw the mic'd up footage that the Broncos released on social, going in one-on-ones against Patrick Surtain, even Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby. He still has contested coverage on him. He's still making plays. What do you see from Courtland? Do you feel like once the regular season comes around, do you expect maybe a little bit of a slow start? I know Vic Fangio alluded to it today that, it might be similar to Bradley Chubb, where you're going to have some slow days. You're going to have some days where you feel better. Where do you see him being by week 1?
Yeah, I do maybe expect a little bit slower start. I will say, he started out slow here at camp. He wasn't catching a ton of passes, wasn't really getting open that often. And then, he really had a breakout day on Wednesday. I think he caught 5 passes, and they were all about 20 yards or so down the field. And he looked good. It didn't look like he had any hesitation in running routes. And I know that, maybe the first couple of days, it looked like he was hesitating just a little bit with that injury. And so, he's looked good. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with him, because again, Jerry Jeudy, as everybody knows, has been fantastic this camp. I mean, he's looked like an all-pro type player, and I think he's gonna have that type of season this year. And if Jerry comes out and becomes the number one go-to guy, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for Courtland. I know Courtland was obviously the number one guy last season and the year before. But I think that might open up some things for Courtland. And when you have an injury like that, I think that'll benefit him, if that makes sense. And so, I expect him maybe to have a slow start to start the season, but he's still got great hands. I mean, the dude, it's not like he's running wide open on the field. Like sometimes Jerry Jeudy is just wide open, and it's stunning to see. But Sutton, if the ball's thrown his way, he's caught a ton of passes in traffic so far in camp. And that's not to say he's not creating separation, but he's making contested catches like he used to. I know he had the one-handed grab the other day with a couple people on him. He's making, catches down the sideline. I think he caught a touchdown pass from Teddy just, I think 2 or 3 days ago. I can't remember. But yeah, no, I think Courtland is going to come back. I don't know if he'll be, maybe the same Pro Bowl type level he was. I think a lot of people around the organization and a lot of his teammates believe that. I know Drew said that the other day. I think it's hard to tell so far in camp, and again, he's going up against some of the best corners in the league right now. So Again, I think next week we'll really be able to tell where Courtland is at in terms of his, recovery and everything that goes into that.
Awesome. Well, hey, final thought here too. Rojesterman Ferris has been making a couple plays this week at Broncos camp, and Vic said, hey, he's got a ticket to make the team. I mean, you look at that DB room, it's so loaded. Right now, it's saying Bassey's still not back yet from the PUP list. Duke Dawson still not off that list yet. Could there be a realistic chance that, Rojesterman Ferris makes this roster just by default, or maybe at least as a practice squad guy?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because, he's a guy that, I think he's going to have to beat out, Abassi, who obviously hasn't been practicing, Dawson, Kerry Vincent, who they took in the 7th round and hasn't been out there a ton because he was also on the COVID list. Mac McCain, who looked really good the first couple days and has been out. So it's lining up for him to have a shot. It just kind of depends on what's that number that they take there at that corner position. And can he slide in and play some nickel? Can he come in and play in the slot? Because I think they're looking for guys that can do both because the way they're playing Surtain right now, he's playing everywhere. And I think they're going to just try and find ways to get him on the field. If a couple injuries go down and Surtain all of a sudden becomes the starting, right cornerback or left cornerback, replacing Fuller or Darby, they're going to need some guys to back up Callahan there in the slot. So I think he is a guy that can make the team. I mean, he's had 2 interceptions, I think, so far in camp, that both pretty impressive ones. I think one was against Teddy, one was against Drew, I think, and he jumped both routes. I think he's definitely a guy that you have to kind of circle and say, okay, can he make the team? But I know Vic is also looking for guys other than Darby and Fuller who are kind of solidified at those 2 corner spots that can kind of play inside, outside, and kind of be guys that can kind of play wherever. So I think he's going to have to do those things if he wants to make the team.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to see it all pan out. Joint training camp practices Wednesday, Thursday. Broncos will practice on Saturday and Sunday. And before heading off to Minnesota, those joint practices. And then it is game time, 2:00 p.m. Mountain Time. The Broncos taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, a fun week in store. I know George will have you covered. Follow him on Twitter at George Stoia. And also check out his work at the Gazette. He's got a feature story coming out on Trinity Benson and some other players. He does a lot of great work, and I love what George is doing. George, thank you for taking time out of your schedule, my man, to come on and talk Broncos football. Can't wait to have you back.
Anytime, Cody.